So this is the first topic, which is on limits and continuity of functions. So for those of you, again, who do not know me, I am Catherine Imerca from the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. So for the outline of the topic, we have here your definition of limits and your limit theorems. You also will discuss intuitive idea of the limit, the definition of the limit, and then proving limits using your definition. It says here optional, but we'll still discuss this one so that you would have an, excuse me, you would have an idea on proving limits using definition. Then we'll discuss also some limit theorems. Now, for our objective, you should be able to evaluate limits at the end of our lecture. Evaluate limits of functions using the important limit theorems. Should be able to discuss one-sided limits, infinite limits, limits at infinity, and demonstrate how these concepts are being used to evaluate limits of functions. You should also be able to discuss the continuity of a function and identify an important property of continuous functions as stated in the intermediate value theorem. And lastly, you should be able to evaluate limits involving sine and cosine function. When you say limits and continuity of functions, the intuitive idea simply says that if you have a function, say y equals f of x, and suppose that your function is defined at its x on some open interval, I containing a except possibly a itself, then we say that L is the limit of the function as x approaches a. When you say limit, it is just actually approaching a certain value, not necessarily equal to that value. No? So it approaches L as x approaches a. Written f of x approaches L as x approaches a. If you're able to watch the video clip that I posted earlier sa group natin, sa FB group natin, then you would understand this intuitive idea of a limit more. Okay, so roughly we say that f of x gets close to L as x gets close to a. So for example, we have the function f of x equals to x plus 3 and say a equal to 0. So what do we have here? When you say for every interval I containing a equal to 0, you can now try to investigate the function value of f of x when x is close to 0. So not necessarily x equal to 0, but close to 0. So if you take a look at the following table here, so for the values which are, say, less than 0, this one, this is our 0, diba? This is 0. Can you see the pointer?
Yes,
Hello?
ma'am.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Yes.
So this one is 0 here.
Yes,
We would
ma'am.
like to find out what is the value of this function. This is the function f of x equals to x plus 3. What is the value of this function as we let x approach 0 from the left? Kani x is less than 0. Kani diri tanan? This one is x is less than 0. So you try to approach the value x is less than 0. X is less than 0. So at x less than 0, when x is equal to negative 1, any negative 1 diri, then what is the value of the function? It's positive 1. This one. Then, negative 1, ang value niya kay positive 1 diha. Correct? When x is equal to negative 0.5, negative 0.5, let me write down here. Kasi ko uy, sorry. I'll move backward. Sana yun? Balikan natin ha. Ika muna. Let me see if I can make use of my pen. Ayun, gamit ko. Great. Ito ba yung kanina? Hindi. Isa pa. Huwag muna tayo. Okay. Ito. Dito tayo kanina, di ba? Ano ko yung pen? Dali lang kasi yung pen is not working. Ayan. Ayan. Okay. So if you take a look at right one here, if we try to find the value of the function when x is equal to -1, wala pa siya nakaabot sa 0, kaninin yung 0, di ba? So at x equal to -1, this is -1 here, 1. What is the value now of the function? Notice ng function kay kani, adiri, this one, and that is 1. So what happens now when x is equal to, bakit merong naglabas na ganito? Wait, ayaw na makita tuloy. What happens when x is equal to -0.5? So move na po na to. -0.5. Pag -0.5, the value is 2. Ito, nandito na. -0.5 man to, di ba dito? So the value is this, 2. This is 2. Yan. And what happens now when x is equal to -0.25? This one, the value is at 2.5. Ito, 2.5. Pag -0.25, the value is at 2.5. Okay, this one, 2.5. Yan. And when -0.10, it's 2.8. So as our x gets closer and closer to 0 from the left, did you understand? At it gets closer and closer to 0 from the left, our value of the function also gets closer and closer to this value 3 here. Kani, 3. Kasi pagdating ng -0.001, 0.00001, we have 2.9998, which is almost 3. Okay? On the other hand, if we approach 0 from the right, that is, x is greater than 0 here, diri na po tagikan, what will happen? Pagikan ta diri, padulong diha. What will happen? When x is equal to 1, we have here 5. So, when x is equal to 1 here, the value of the function is supposed to be equal to 5. Okay. Where is 5 here? This is 4. Nandito ang 5 ninyo. Or, this is 5. Di ba? Ito 5. 5. Oh. Yan. So, 1 man siya diri. Correct? So, the value there is 5. So, when x is equal to 0.5, so it's, you get closer this time to 0. So, 0.5 is here. Then what's the value? It's supposed to be equal to 4. So, at 0.5 here, the value is 4. So, pag mas malapit pa sa 0 uli here, it gets closer also to this value, which is 3. That is, when you have 0.001, you get 3. So, yun yung meaning ng the limit of the function f of x as x approaches 0 is equal to what value? This one, equal to 3. Diba? Pag 2 times 0, that will be plus 3. But what is 2 times 0? That's 0. So you get a value equal to 3. Okay? Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, let me check the next one here. Previous next tayo. Enter. Okay. So from this table, we see that the value of f of x equals to 2x plus 3 gets close to 3 as x gets close to 0. This happens, why? Because 3 is actually the limit of the function as x approaches. Take a look at this one. Ito. Itong value na to. So, yung ating pen. This one. Itong value na to. This one. As you approach 0 here, you approach 0 here from the right, and you approach 0 from the left, you also approach this value here, which is equal to 3. Okay, 2 times 0 will give you 3 there. So this is actually the graph of this function. So in symbols, we write it as follows. That is, the limit of 2x plus 3 is equal to 3 as x approaches 0. Take the second example. The second example is you are to consider the function defined by f of x equals x squared minus 4 all over x minus 2 when x is equal to 2. What will happen when x is equal to 2? You will have a function. You have 2 squared minus 4, 2 minus 2. You will come up with 0 over 0, which is an indeterminate. So how are we going to solve for this function now? To solve for the limit of this. Now, if you recall your special product formula says that, pen natin, let us take a look at our pen here. Okay. You try to recall your special product formula. Recall. Ayaw na magsulat. Why are you not writing anymore? Let me see. Sorry ha. Pasulatin natin yung pen. So recall, your special product formula is if you have u squared minus v squared, the factors are u minus v times u plus v. Can you still remember this formula?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So let us make use of this formula in this one. So this one can now be rewritten actually as your f of x equals x minus 2. Okay, kasi ang 2 squared is your 4, di ba? Times x plus 2 all over, x minus 2. So, meaning to say, ang gagawin natin is, we now rewrite this as, we can now take the limit of f of x, this is f of x, as equal to the limit of, because you rewrite this as x minus 2, x plus 2, all over x minus 2, as x approaches 2, we have x approaches 2. Kasi diba it says, let us look how we approach that one. Remember that it's not actually equal to 2. It is just approaching 2. So if it's just approaching 2, mean to say, dili ni siya ma-0. Na siya gamay diri nga lapas sa 2. So, x here is not equal to 2, meaning to say, we can actually divide this out. Kay dili man na siya ma-0. Okay, x is not equal to 2 man. So, we can now have the limit now of x plus 2 all over, this one is 1 na, kasi x minus 2. So, you now have x approaches 2. So, the value of that function, the value of the limit of this function now becomes, you can directly substitute 2 and then plus 2, so that will be equal to 4. Okay? So, that's how powerful the idea of a limit is. You are able to solve for the limit value of that because we know that we are simply approaching 2 and that x is not actually equal to 2, but we are simply approaching the value 2. So, how does it look? Making use of the table, again, take a look at the table. Here, when you say simply approach the value 2, then if we have a value from x equal to 1, say, ito, dito natin i-drawing. Oops. Ang x is, so, we are simply approaching the value 2. Ito ko lang isulat ang x. Ito na lang, 2 na lang yan. So, if we approach x from the left, that is, dito, umpisa tayo, say 1 dito, no? Approach 2 from the left. So, x here is less than 2. When x is equal to 1, what do we get? The value is 3. When x is 1.5, the value is 3.5. So, notice that when we increase this, we have up to 1.999, almost close to 2, you get the value 3.999. So it is actually approaching the value what? What is this value? 4. Okay? Now, tama ba yung ginawa ko doon? 4 ba yung answer ko doon? Let me see. 4, di ba? Okay. If you take a look, it's 4 here. The answer here is 4. Correct? So because also when we take values, ano ito? Let's see. Yan. This is your 2 and you approach it from the right, that is x is greater than 2. You have here, say 2.5 before makaabot sa 2. What's the value of the function? You have 4.5. When you get 2.4 less than, padul na po siya sa 2, you get 4.4. And down the line, if you have 2.001, very close na sa 2, what's the value of the function when you substitute to this function? You get 4.001. So here we can see that as x gets closer to 2, x gets closer and closer to the value 4. Naintindihan? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige. Here. So how does your graph look like? This one. F of x equal to x squared minus 4 all over x minus 2. There is actually a hole kasi hindi man siya pwede maging 2. What will happen pag x is equal to 2? It will actually be undefined. That's why the graph of the function looks like this. As you approach x, as you approach 2 from the left and you approach 2 from the right, you get very, very close to 4, but it's actually not equal to 4. So what is the formal definition of your limit? You have a function which is defined for all x on the open interval I containing a, except possibly at a itself. So that the limit of f of x as x approaches a is given by the following. You write it as the limit of f of x as x approaches a is equal to L. That is, if for every epsilon greater than 0, however small, there exists a delta greater than 0, such that your absolute value of f of x minus L is less than epsilon whenever 0 is less than the absolute value of x minus a less than delta. Notice how it was written. No? Kaning delta, this is a very, very small value. Whenever you have here a very, very small value, so as the function gets closer and closer to the limit here, okay, bale, gamay po ang value diri sa delta, di ba? So, let me see dun sa graph natin para makita niyo. Ito, if you, di ba, pag closer and closer here, padulong diha, and closer, so gamay po ang value diha. Notice na kani siya mag-closer and closer, magamay po ang value diha. Closer and closer to this limit function. You get a value very close to the point. Yun ang ibig sabihin nito. X, the absolute value of x minus a is less than delta, but it is greater than 0. Nothing else is 0. Greater siya than 0. Very close to 0. Similarly, this one is less than epsilon. Let's take the first example here. Prove that the limit of 2x plus 5 is equal to 9 as x approaches 2. So, we go back to the definition of your limit. That is, the limit of f of x is equal to L as x approaches a if for every epsilon greater than 0, however small, there exists a delta greater than 0 such that f of x minus L is less than epsilon whenever you have 0 is greater than absolute value of x minus a less than delta. So to prove this, you make use of this definition. Yung sabi ko sa inyo na optional siya na topic for you, pero let's just discuss it para makita nyo how we actually make use of proving. So we need to show that for every epsilon greater than 0, there exists a delta greater than 0 such that, ito yung ano natin, di ba? 2x plus 5 Actually, yung function ninyo, yan, f of x ninyo, to x plus 5, minus 9. So, this is our L, the limit 9, is less than, you have epsilon. So, from there, dapat, ito, nakita natin ito, whenever 0 is greater than x minus a is less than delta. And how do we do that? We try to go backwards. No? So, we consider the following. 2x plus 5 minus 9. So, ito yung prove natin, di ba? 2x plus 5 minus 9 is equal to, saan nagaling itong 2x plus 5 minus 9? Yung function ninyo, minus L. 2x plus 5 minus 9 is equal to 2x minus 4. Because we can simply operate on this. What is 5 plus 9? Positive 5 minus 9. It's equal to negative 4. So, you now have absolute value of 2x minus 4 equals, you can, 2 is positive, di ba? But absolute value is always non-negative. So, you can take out 2. And 2 times x minus 2 is still equal to the absolute value of 2x minus 4. So, from there, you now have the following. You have to show that 2 times the absolute value of x minus 2 is less than epsilon whenever 0 is less than x minus 2 less than delta. And from there, you now have, you can divide this by 2 para x minus 2 na lang on one side. So, x minus 2 is less than epsilon over 2. Divide by 2 on this, divide by 2 on this, so you have this one. So, whenever 0 is less than x minus 2 less than delta. So, you take delta to be equal to your epsilon over 2. Thus, for every epsilon greater than 0, there exists a delta there, which is equal to epsilon over 2. Okay, itong epsilon over 2 ninyo will now be your delta, so that you can now rewrite as 2x plus 5 minus 9 is less than epsilon whenever you have 0 is less than x minus 2 less than delta. Okay, so ang delta is your epsilon over 2 dependent upon your epsilon here. Yeah. So delta is dependent upon the given epsilon that you have. So you now have proven that indeed the limit of 2x plus 5 as x approaches 2 is equal to 9. Okay? Siguro medyo alien pa sa inyong proving, no? Pero as you go through the topic, then we will learn how to prove later on. So there is another example, example 2. I'll just leave this one to you to go through. Okay, this is the limit of 2x plus 3 is equal to 3 as x approaches 0. The approach is the same as the first example, so you can just take a look at this one. And then we have to consider the following limit theorems. Are you still with me, class?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Sige,
Yes,
sige.
ma'am.
So for the limit theorems, the first limit theorem says that if you have a limit of the function L1 and the limit of the second function as x approaches a is L2, then because this is the same function and the same function, then it should be the case that this limit L1 is the same as your L2. So dapat equal sila. Kung pareho ang function tapos pareho po ang value kung saan nag-approach. Okay? Now, if b and c are constants, then the limit of bx plus c as x approaches a is equal to ba plus c. Meaning to say, pag linear lang siya, tapos x approaches a, pwede na directly substitute. Now, b times a. Constant man yan. So, b times a plus c. If c is a constant, then for any real number a, what do we have here? Limit of a constant as x approaches c is equal to c. So, limit ng constant is the same as the constant there as x approaches c. For example, naamoy limit of, okay, let us see. Limit of 5 as x approaches, say, 2. Kahit ano pa to, nag-approach, yung, ano pa yung a, pero constant man. So, ano ba? C. So, 5. Limit of 5 as x approaches to is still equal to, ay, naku, ayaw magsulat. Sorry, let me see. Pen. It's equal to 5. Itong example nito, say, we take the limit of, say, 3x plus, say, 4. Tapos, as x approaches a. So that will now become 3 times x approaches a man. So 3a plus the same value, 4. So yeah. See the next one. For any real number a, limit of x is equal to a as x approaches a. So pareho yan sa except that this time x approaches a. So kung meron kayong say limit of sobrahan na. Balik ko ng konti. Ito muna. So, kunyari, meron akong example. I have, say, limit of okay. Naglalo ko yung pen. So, we have limit of, say, x as x approaches 5. So, what happens? X approaches 5. So, dapat itong a. So, a. So, dapat equal yan sa 5. Sundan, x approaches 5 man. So, 5. Next, if limit of f of x equal to L and limit of g of x equal to m, then when you add the limit of the function, yung ibig sabihin yan, when you add the limit of the function, then you also add the value of the limits. Ito, limit of f of x plus g of x as x approaches a is equal to the limit of f of x, so ito, plus the limit of g of x. So, kung anong limit ng f of x, yun din ang value L. Limit ng g of x, yun din ang value niya. M. Okay? Ang limit of f of x mo daw kay L, tapos ang limit ng g of x kay M. So, yun din ang value doon. Nasundan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Sige. Klaro ba ko? Dili ko choppy? Ano mo?
Dilera, ma'am.
Okay. So let's take a look on other limit theorems. We have the limit of the following. Multiplication. That is, if you take the limit of f sub 1x as x approaches a is L1 and limit of f sub 2x as x approaches a is equal to L2, then pag i-multiply ninyo ang f sub 1x f sub 2x, then kwaon ang iyang limit, can you multiply, then it's the same as you take individually the limit of f sub 1x times the limit of f sub 2x. So, notice na i-distribute lang diri ang limit, di ba? Basta the same ha, x approaches a lang, silang pareho, x approaches a na, x approaches a. Kaya kung lahi po ng value dili na siya ma-apply. Okay? So, multiplication lang gihapon po ang result sa ilang limit. Number 7. If limit of f of x is equal to L as x approaches a and n is any positive integer, then the limit of f of x raised to the n as x approaches a is, again, what do? Pwede na isulod ang limit. I-solve sa ang limit, then erase. So kung value sa limit diri, sa function kay L, then erase lang po siya sa n value. The limit of f of x as x approaches a is equal to L. If the limit, is equal to L, then if you take the limit of the nth root of f of x, that is equal to the limit of f of x as x approaches a, the nth root. So, pwede na siya pag gihapon nga nga kwaon ang limit daan sa function, then nahiha kwaon ang nth root. Okay, ang limit sa function is supposed to be equal to L, so you simply take the nth root. As long as ang nth root sa limit kay element sa real number. Otherwise, pag dili siya defined, then we can make use of that theorem. Other limit theorems would be the following. Pwede siya sa division po, no? If limit of f of x equal to L as x approaches A and limit of g of x as x approaches A is equal to M, as long as your limit value M is not equal to 0, then you can take the limit of f of x over g of x as x approaches A. Pwede siya sa tagsaon. Kuhaon sa ang limit sa f of x as x approaches A, then kuhaon na po ang limit sa g of x as x approaches A. And you will have L over M. Okay, L man ang limit sa f of x as x approaches A. Then ang limit sa g of x as x approaches A kay M man. So you have that one. Number 10, if the function f and g exist such that equal sila, then for all x not equal to A, and if the limit of g of x exists, then the limit of f of x as x approaches A also exists. Okay? Moreover, kaning limit is actually equal to that limit there. This one, kaning siya is more generalization katong sa product kanina. So, daghan siya, no? L1, ang limit sa F2 kay L2. Then, we now have the following. Pwede siya ma-add. Ito, whatever is ang L1 ninyo. Ano L1. Limit po sa F2. Limit sa F2 as x approaches A. Kay L2 man. So, you add also. Similarly, pag multiplication mo, pwede mo multiply. Kani, take a look at this one now. So that's the other one. Limit of f of sub 1x is equal to L1. Then, ang sunod kay L2. So, pag i-multiply siya, ang limit sa function, then pareho nagyapon siya sa i-multiply the limit, the value of its limits. So, take the following example. First example here is evaluate the following limit. Limit of x squared plus 2x plus 1 all over x squared plus 4 as x approaches minus 1. So, pag i-solve ni siya, you will have negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 plus 1. Diba? Ano siya? Ano ba itong values dito? So, yan. Ito. Negative 1 squared plus 2 times negative 1 plus 1. Negative 1 squared plus 4. Okay? So, that should give us, kanikay, negative 1 squared is 1. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Plus 1 man. So, 1 plus 1. Then minus 2, it will give you 0. So, on the other hand, sa ubos, you have negative 1 squared is positive 1 plus 4. That gives you 5. So, this function here, this function has a limit when x approaches negative 1 equal to 0. How about example number 2? The limit of the cube root of h plus 1 minus 1 all over h as h approaches here. Kinsay makarecall sa special product formula sa cube? Anyone? Hello? Are you still with me, class? Na ay makarecall sa special product formula? Anybody?
Kuan ma'am, x minus y times x squared plus 2xy plus y squared.
Okay, let's see. Let's see. So when you factor this one, that should give us, pag directly substitute mo na ha, it will give you 0 over 0. So mean to say, dili ni siya direct substitution. So what are we going to do? You have to make use of the special product formula. And the special product formula is this. That is the cube root of h plus 1 minus 1 can now be multiplied with the following. Medyo ano yung ano mo kasi walang 2, no? Dapat ang formula is like this. You have u, pero almost correct na. You have u cube, ang formula kay u cube minus v cube equals u minus v, okay? Correct man siya ganina, no? Times u squared, then kani, plus uv plus v squared. Ang ano nila kasi mayroon siyang 2 dito. Okay? So, mahirap ba yung mag-recall? So, you are almost correct there. Okay? So, here, very good, no? You now have cube root of h plus 1 minus 1 over h. That is multiplied by this quantity, which is the square of this, cube root of x plus 1, plus the product of this, pero instead of minus, plus na dayon. So, correct to siya ganina. Dapat plus na the product of this one and that one, which is cube root of x plus 1 plus 1. And then the square of this one, which is, okay? So, you can, if you are not familiar with this one, as I've said, this is a formula, you can multiply these two. Verify natin para ma-convince ng uban niya maugid na siya ang formula. Let me see. Tingnan natin dito ha. You have ano yung aking pen niya? U squared minus plus uv plus v squared times u minus v. So when you multiply u times u squared, you will have u cube. U times uv will have plus u squared v. U times v squared, you will have plus uv squared. And then minus v times u squared, you will have minus u squared v. Minus v times uv is minus uv squared. Then minus v times v squared is minus v cubed. So, you now have u cube. Kani ma-cancel out. So, minus v cube. Okay? This one. Ano yung aking pen? Kaya yun. U cube minus v cube is kani siya. Nakuha? Eh, yung sabi ko sa inyo kanina na ang mga special product formula kailangan. And that's actually your algebra part. Okay? So you cannot solve this problem unless you are familiar with your algebra. Okay? So next would be for you to, pag i-multiply na ning duha, this is by the way 1. Diba? 1 lang ito. It's 1. So you did not change the problem because you multiply it by this quantity which is equal to 1. Diba? Cube root x plus 1 squared. Pareho lang man na siya diri. Cube root. Then plus. So you multiply it by 1. Then, from the special product formula, that means to say that this is the same as this. Cube minus 1 cube. And when you have the cube root, tapos i-cube na po siya, that will give you h plus 1. Wala na ning radical symbol. So that is actually equal to the limit now of this one when you cube that is h plus 1 minus 1 plus 1 all over, h times this quantity. Hindi ko na isulat ha. Dapat nang sulat ito. Kanang quantity. So, but what is as h approaches 0? H approaches 0. But what is this? H plus 1 minus 1. H plus 1 minus 1 is simply h. Ano siya? Kani? H. Then kaning sa ubos, this one, the same as this. So, okay, yung sabi ko doon. So, meaning to say, this one can be, diba, h not equal to 0, kaya nag-approach man lang siya sa h. So, ma-divide out ni h divided by h will give you 1. So, the result will now be 1 over this one. May word na limit ito. Limit, dapat may limit, no? Pero, but because, bakit wala na siyang limit ito? Kasi nag-substitute naman tayo. So, they should be equal to the limit now of 1 over, kani siya, cube root of h plus 1, a quantity squared plus, pangit itong pang sulat ko ngayon. It's not working well, the pen. So, anyway, I hope maintindihan pa rin ninyo. From here. So, dito, that is the cube root of, sorry, h plus 1. Kasi Nagtatantrum yung pen. Ako. Okay. H plus cube root yan ha. Cube root of H plus 1 plus 1. Okay? So this one, may plus yan. Ito na yan. Since H is not equal to 0, as H approaches 0, you can simply rewrite it as, ma-divide out na siya. Pag divide out, then that's the time that when you take the limit, you can substitute out the value of H now equal to 0. It's 1 over cube root of 0 plus 1 squared plus cube root of 0 plus 1 plus 1. So, ang reason lang na magamit na diri H is not equal to 0 there is because you would like to divide it out by H. Okay? So, pag divide out nyo, then that's the time that you can directly substitute na. So, baka sabihin, Ma'am, H not equal to 0 man. Yung anong dili, substitute naman siya there. Because it is approaching 0. So the value now from here will give you 1, that is cube root of 0 plus 1. What is cube root of 0 plus 1? Cube root of 1. Pero, inyo pag-square, 1 na gihapon ang result. So 1, then kanina po. 1, then 1 na po ang result. So what is the answer? The final answer is 1/3. Okay? Kani 1 over, this is 1 plus 1 plus 1. So the answer is 1. Okay. 20, malapit na. Ako, baka time na. So, number 3, that is the square root of x plus 2 minus 2, x minus 2. What do you think would be the special product formula that we can make use of again this time? Anybody?
Multiplying something 1, ma'am.
Yes, correct. But, anong itsura ng 1 natin ngayon?
Square root of x plus 2 plus 2 over square root of x plus 2 and plus 2 dayon, ma'am.
Okay, very good. That's good. So you already have an idea that you have to multiply it by 1 so that you do not change the problem. But this one is actually from what formula? You made use of the formula. Kanina formula. Kika, nasa naman to akong pen? Let me use. Our formula this time is your U, okay, squared minus minus V here. So U squared minus V squared equals U minus V times U plus V. This is the formula that you made use of. Okay? Ang U natin this time is your square root of x plus 2. Ang V natin was supposed to be your 2 there. Okay? So, when you square that, di ba, ang result kay U squared minus V squared. So, U minus V times U plus V. Kani siya, U minus V times, this one is our U, yapon, then plus V. So, dapat ang result, pag i-multiply is U squared minus V squared. So, you now have U squared, this one, kanima na U squared ninyo, minus V squared. Matanggal na dayon ang inyong radical sign there. So, that you will now have x plus 2 squared minus 2 squared, or, matanggal na yung radicals as I've said, you now have x plus 2, it's yours, excuse me, minus 4, all over x minus 2, squared of x plus 2, plus 2. So again, what is x plus 2 minus 4? That is x minus 2. So kung nana kay x minus 2 diri, napay x minus 2 diha, x approaching 2 lang, ma-divide out na po siya. So remember that x is not equal to 2 here. So ma-divide out na po, and you will now come up with x minus 2 over x minus 2. So you have 1 over, so ito makancel ito, di ba? Ito, yan, ma-divide out din siya. Divide out yan. Because x is not equal to 2. It's just approaching 2. So 1 over square root of x plus 2 plus 2. But when you take the limit now, as x approaches 2, you will have 1 over square root of 2 plus 2. But what is square root of 2 plus 2? May na siyang 1 over square root of 2 plus 2 plus 2. That's equal to 1 over square root of 4, then plus 2, which is equal to 1 over 2 plus 2, which is equal to kanino value? 1 over 4. Okay? So, napay mga steps. From here, you still have, to get 1 over 4, you have the following steps here. Here are the exercises. You can try solving them out. And we have here the references. You can take a look. Ito yung sabi ko kanina sa inyo na it's supposed to be, your basic calculus is supposed to be discussed already in your senior high. Okay? So, if in case hindi pa, then you can take a look at this text. This is actually an online text. Available man ito. I-click lang ninyo to, then you'll be able to find it online. Okay? So, I also made use of the Analytic Geometry in Calculus 1. Textbook yan ng department before. And then, also Louis Lighthold. This is a very thick book. This is what I used when I was in college. Ito yung ginamit namin na text. Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Calculus 3 sa engineering. For SBS Math, ganun din. 3 series ng calculus ito. Itong calculus with analytic geometry. 3 semesters namin ginamit ito. Then, I also made use of calculus with analytic, some notes by Dr. Benitez. The notes, yung mga old notes ko, and then old notes also of Dr. Malacas last semester, yung mga notes nito. Last semester ko na notes. Yun yung ginamit ko dito na references. Okay? And there are some helpful links here. The YouTube channel here, mga tutorials sa Math Lamar, and then this MOS calculator, which I made use of when I graphed the values of the functions. Okay? What time is it now? Okay. Let's just discard the annotations. Anyway, we were done with this. So, let's see. Okay, time na, 3:29. We still have 30 more minutes. But, hindi ko na i-discuss yung next topic. I would like you to read about that. The next topic, let's see. Stop muna natin itong recording para, okay, stop